What's up, bros and besties? How's it going? Okay, so I wore a t-shirt tonight instead of what I normally wear, and I'm still trying to figure out where to put my mic. So I'm gonna just hold it for now. But happy Valentine's Day, y'all. I just realized tomorrow is Valentine's Day. And yes, there are reasons why I just realized that. Let's just say it's not something that's exactly been on my calendar, but it's all good. But tonight we've got plenty of sports headlines to talk about. As you can tell from the thumbnail, we've got some NFL business to discuss, just shedding some light on what happened between the NFL and the NFLPA today. It culminated today, but this was a grievance that had actually been filed back in August related to the public report cards that so many people love. So we're going to get into that. We're also going to talk about the Cowboys' most recent coaching hire. Not the hire so much, but more so what the hire represents and the hires that have happened recently, what they represent to me. And I'll explain that when we get to that part. And then we're going to start off with some shout outs and call outs, though, because the Winter Olympics have been going on, and I don't plan on this being like a long stream at all. So I am going to talk about what's been happening with the Winter Olympics, but this still isn't going to be a long stream at all. So let's go ahead and start out with these shout outs and call outs. Oh, and I actually do have pictures to go with everything today. So give me 1 second. I swear, when I come home from work and I start like pulling all this stuff together, I'm always like, I'm gonna forget something. I know I'm gonna forget something. But I mean, hey, that's the life of being a working content creator. Sometimes you just work with the time that you have and you go from there. But shout out to the people who just popped into the stream. Definitely hop in the chat, say hi. Let me know if you can hear me because I feel like that's the thing that pops up all the time when people are like, we can't hear you. But if my sound levels are correct, y'all should be able to hear me. All right. So we are going to start off with some shout outs and call outs. So the first shout out and call out is like a combination shout out and call out, and it is related to a situation that has been happening at the Winter Olympics, but not necessarily competition related. So we have a whole slew of athletes that have gone to Milan Cortina for the 2026 Winter Olympics. Shout out to them. And during their press appearances, they were asked about some of the stuff that's been happening in the US. Basically, in general, they were all responding to what it's like to represent America at such a controversial, tumultuous time in the country's history. And they had different answers. And so I guess I have several call outs for this because I'm going to get to the main one involving Amber Glenn, which is who you see on your screen right now. But the first thing that I don't like is how certain athletes were pitted against one another. I'm like, they have different experiences as Americans, and that should be allowed. That's fine. Not to mention the fact that the experiences weren't being compared in what I would consider an apples to apples kind of way. So there was an article I read where there was a black woman who was also a veteran, and she was talking about how she appreciated the experiences that came along with being a veteran and how they allowed her to get to the point where she's competing in the Olympics for the United States. That's dope. I love that for her. But then Amber Glenn had a very different response. But she was talking about the experience of being a queer person in the US. That's very different. And so my thing is the black woman wasn't asked about her particular protected class or sociological class as a black woman. She was talking about being a veteran. And I don't know what she would have said if she had been speaking specifically to being a black woman representing the US. I don't know what she would have said, but she was talking about her experience of being a veteran. And so they described her as being grateful and showing gratitude. Whereas Amber Glenn, who you see on your screen, received threats for being honest. And so I'm calling out the people who are pitting those people against each other because I'm like, all of those experiences can be true. You can be a veteran who has received certain benefits or certain access, certain opportunities, and be very grateful for those. And you may also be a person who is not very happy about the experience that you've had in the US. And then there's another reason why I'm calling out critics of Amber Glenn. But first, I want to let y'all know what exactly it was that she said that got people so up in arms. Because, like I said, she answered the question in what I think was a respectful way. She didn't go overboard. And then she started receiving threats for this response. So, what she said was, it's been a hard time for the community overall in this administration. It isn't the first time that we've had to come together as a community and try to fight for our human rights. And now, especially, it's not just affecting the queer community, but many other communities. I think that we are able to support each other in a way that we didn't have to before. And because of that, it's made us a lot stronger. That's what she said. And I'm just like, okay, for the people on the right who are criticizing her for that, half the platform of the right, of Republicans, is to make it a hard time for queer people. Like, you don't want queer people to have rights. So if she's saying, yeah, as a queer person in America, because Amber Glenn identifies as pansexual, right? So if she's saying, as a queer person in America, it's been kind of hard, then that means you're doing your job. Why are you sending her threats just because she said it out loud? Shouldn't you like be excited? Like, yeah, our plan is working or some shit. I don't know. It just felt very weird to send threats to someone who's exercising what should be one of the most awesome rights as an American, like freedom of speech. That's not something everybody has. You know what I'm saying? So, like, the freedom to be critical, to be honest about your experience in this country, that's one of the dope things about being an American. Just because you don't agree with it doesn't mean it's un-American, it's unpatriotic. No, she's doing a very American thing. And then once again, if you are a person who doesn't like queer people, why are you sending her threats for being honest about the fact that, like, yeah, it's been hard for queer people? Like, you can't have your cake and eat it too. Like, I don't know. The whole situation is just weird to me. Um, but here's the shout out component of this shout out and call out. And this might be the only shout out in today's list of shout outs and call outs. The shout out is for how she responded, because she took some time away from social media in response to what was happening, in response to the threats that she was getting, which that makes sense. Like, that's got to be a scary thing to say something that's honest and to say it in a relatively mild way and then start receiving these threats, not knowing who they're coming from, not knowing how much danger you might actually be in, you know? Um, but she took a break from social media. She actually did well in the team competition, helped get the team to gold. That was dope. But then she went on TikTok and posted a picture of her and a teammate, Elisa Liu. She posted a picture of them together with the caption that said, "They hate to see two woke bitches winning." Bruh, when I saw that, I was just like, yes, bitch, yes. Because what I love two things about this. One, I love the fact that she's finding strength in this situation. And I know that's not everybody's ministry. Not everybody is going to be able to just bounce back and be so defiant. But I love this for her. I love that she's finding it in herself to be so strong and defiant in this situation. And it's just like, as much as y'all know, if y'all been listening to me, y'all know I cannot stand the way the mainstream has co-opted the word woke and turned it into something that it did not originally mean. I cannot stand that. But I love the way that she used it here. And I love the fact that the caption continued. She went on to say, if woke means people who use their platforms to advocate for marginalized communities in the country that they are actively representing, then yeah, sure. And I love the fact that she was so specific, because she's acknowledging, like, yo, I am still representing America. I can acknowledge that there are marginalized communities here that need to be represented, that need to be spoken for, and still represent the country and still be proud of the opportunity to represent the country. And that's a dichotomy that a lot of people don't seem to understand, that they can't seem to relate to. You know what I'm saying? But I love this for her. I love that she's not letting other people define who she is and what she stands for. She's making it known for herself who she is and what she stands for. She's being outspoken about it. She's finding her strength. She's finding her defiance, and she's not backing down from who she is. So shout out to Amber Glenn. Much respect to Amber Glenn. I hope she has a great week. She has some more competitions coming up this week, and I wish her nothing but the best. Um, the last call out that I want to do in this section of shout outs and call outs, and then I'm gonna look at the chat. I see Clement is in the chat, but there's something going on with my contacts. I cannot see from here what you're saying. But what's up, Clement? Thanks for joining me in the chat, and I'm gonna look at your comment in a second. But the last call out that I want to get in this section of shout outs and call outs, I want to call out whoever is responsible for the fact that so many skaters had to switch their music last second because of licensing and royalties issues. Like, I hate this for them so much because that is not something that you should have to deal with as an Olympic athlete. That is not something that you should be focused on. It's definitely not something that should ever come up last minute like it did for these athletes. So this is going to be a little bit of a read and react, and I'm going to tell y'all what exactly happened here. So here's the timeline, and I'm gonna give y'all some background as well as the current timeline. So back in 2018, there was a rule change. So traditionally in the Olympics, they weren't allowed to use music with lyrics, right? In 2018, they changed that rule. And they said that skaters are allowed to use music with lyrics. The only thing is that a lot of the music that has lyrics and a lot of the music that skaters were selecting, they're not, they're protected. So they're not, open domain is the word for songs that don't have any kind of protection. You can use them however and don't have to worry about licensing. But these songs, the ones with lyrics, the more modern songs, are typically heavily protected by copyright laws. And so you have to secure licensing in order to play these songs in public, especially in international broadcasting. And so this can be complex. And the only reason I even know so much about it is because my dad was in the music industry, my brother's in the music industry, and they've had to deal with this stuff. But basically, it's not always cut and dry how you get permission. So, for example, at the Grammys, Kendrick Lamar talked about getting the sample cleared to make the song Luther, and how emotional he was about getting the Luther Vandross sample cleared, right? Um, and so if it's complicated for someone who's actually in the music industry, who's from the LA area, he's from Compton, he's well connected, he knows Dr. Dre, he knows all these people, but it's not even a guarantee for him. And it even took a lot of time for him. And so that just gives you an idea of how complicated it can be, and how little of a certainty it can be, right? But then, to give you a peek behind the curtain, it's not always cut and dry who you go to. Sometimes it's the label, sometimes it's the artist. If it's a song from a movie, sometimes it might be the movie studio. And so sometimes it can be tricky to even figure out who you go to get the clearance, and what the requirement is for getting the clearance. There are some people who like, an artist could literally be like, I don't care. Anybody can use my music, use it, I don't care. They have that right. Or they could be like, you can only use it if you pay me a certain amount, or you can only use it if you give me a credit in this specific way. That's how the licensing rights work. You have to go to the right person, and they have to tell you what's required. Once again, going back to the example of Kendrick Lamar, he said that they told him he wasn't allowed to cuss on the song if they were to use it for the song that he was creating. You know what I'm saying? So it could be anything that they put as stipulations. So this is a complex process, and that's why I feel like it shouldn't be up to the athletes to fix this, because this is a broadcasting issue. This is copyright. This is licensing issues. And so this has to do with the fact that NBC is broadcasting this internationally. And so that creates all kinds of issues with copyright laws and licensing technicalities that I don't think it should be up to skaters and their teams to deal with. And so here's what I'm going to say in advance of the 2028 Olympics, because we know this is going to come up with those floor routines that the gymnasts like to do, and probably in some other competitions too. So I'm just saying this right now: mute the fucking music. I don't want to see no gymnast. I don't want to see no other athlete have to change their music last second because of your licensing and copyright bullshit. Mute the fucking music. Don't put it in the stream. Don't put it in the broadcast, because like if you post it on TikTok after the fact, all you have to do is like select the song and do that whole thing. It's a way simpler process. And here's the thing: they even outlined a quote unquote simple process for these skaters to use, but it wasn't, there was no way to follow up and make sure that the platform that they used to be like a one-stop shop for licensing, basically, there was no way to follow up and make sure that it was actually getting the licensing in the proper way. And there were a couple of people who even used that option, and then their clearance still came back rejected at the last second. So I'm just like, mute the fucking music. Don't make these athletes have to jump through hoops and worry about all these technicalities that really have nothing to do with them. They can still compete even if us at home, even if we can't hear the music. So let them get their routines off, and then find some way to fix it after the fact, because this is bullshit to put athletes through this because of all these legal complications that have to do with, lawyers and copyright and all kind of other shit that should have nothing to do with art. So that's my thing. Mute the fucking music next time. Don't put these athletes through this. It's unnecessary. Okay. So that's the shout outs and call outs. On that note, let me see what's next in my slideshow. Cowboys. We got some Cowboys news to get to before we talk about what happened with the NFL and NFLPA today. So, in case you missed it, the Cowboys made a new hire today. Hold on, I'm trying to get to my notes on this. Okay, so the Cowboys made a new hire today. Scott Simmons, I think that's how you say his name. It's either Simmons or Simons. But they hired him as an inside linebacker coach. And so I told y'all in the beginning of this, I said, I don't have a lot to say about the coaching hires because there have been several. And I'm going to go through them in a second. And I don't have a lot to say about the coaching hires specifically, but I'm going to tell you why they're significant to me. So for those who want a recap, last time on the Dallas Cowboys coaching search. So here's who's been hired. So we have Kyle Fuller, who's the assistant offensive line coach, also quality control. Scott Simmons, inside linebacker. Robert Muschamp, who's the assistant secondary coach. I'm going to try to say his name right. Shadera Uzo Deribe, who's the outside linebackers coach. And then we've got Marcus Dixon, who's a defensive line coach. Ryan Smith, who's a cornerbacks coach. Derek Ansley as a passing game coordinator. Stephen Bravo Brown, who's the assistant wide receiver coach. And then, of course, we had Christian Parker, who's the defensive coordinator. And I'm going to put a pin in this just for a second because I told Clement I would look at his comments in the chat, and I didn't. My bad. Clement said good evening and also said check out the ice hockey, both men and women. Oh, women's ice hockey for the US is kicking ass. I just didn't have time to talk about them today, but they're doing their thing. Speed skating, I've been kind of keeping an eye on, and downhill skiing, I've been kind of keeping an eye on. I'm gonna be honest, I've been mostly watching figure skating and curling because I still got to work. I still got shit to do. So I've only been able to watch so much. I've been watching figure skating, curling, a little bit of luge, and I think I saw a little bit of skeleton today. But I do need to watch more of the hockey because they're doing their thing. Now, the men's curling team, I don't know if I'm going to watch them anymore. I don't know if I have the heart to watch them anymore. But the women's that went over Canada today, I'm proud of them for that. I'm proud of them for that. They got in their bag for that one. And curling is a fun sport. I did not realize it was such a fun sport, but like the more I learn about it, the more I'm like, yo, this shit is kind of dope. Anyway, back to the Cowboys. So I just ran down the list of the coaches that they hired recently, a lot of them on the defensive side of the ball, which is what we saw coming. And so here's the thing. I don't have a lot to say about the coaches because like pretty much what I know about the coaches is their resume. And I feel like there's a lot you can infer from that, but I'm not really in the business of inferences. That's not my ministry. And so in my opinion, there's too many variables with these guys going from one place to another, in some cases going from college to the pros. And then we've got a new defensive coordinator for the Cowboys anyway. And then there's going to be new personnel in terms of the players for the Cowboys anyway. I'm like, it's just too many variables for me to spend a lot of time on what I think these coaches are going to bring to the table, so on and so forth. Because like I said, not my ministry. But here's what's interesting to me. So I saw that Scott Simmons was hired today. Apparently he's 40 years old. And that actually makes him one of the oldest coaches to be hired so far in this coaching cycle for the Cowboys. And so my thing about it is this. The league as a whole is trending younger when it comes to hiring coaches, especially position coaches, right? The league as a whole is trending younger. But for the Cowboys, if we look at all the new coaches that they've hired so far in 2026, the average age is a little bit over 35 years old. I didn't count like months and everything, but it's somewhere around 35.3 years old, it seems, right? And so even with the league as a whole trending younger, that is still a very young average age for new hires. Very, very young. And then if you look at just the average age of who's on defense, the average age gets lower. It goes down to a little bit under 35 to like 34.8 or so. Once again, that's an estimate because I didn't count months. But I'm just like, whoa, that is it's significant to me because to me it's a sign of not just like one young guy being hired, not two, but we're talking like eight or nine guys being hired that are like 41 or younger. And I feel like for an organization like the Dallas Cowboys that are so known for being like old school, for being a good old boys club, now they've got like the cool uncle club. You know what I'm saying? Like when it comes to their coaching hires, we're so used to the head coach retreads and just older guys that the Joneses knew from way back whenever, and they're like, "Oh, I've been wanting to hire this guy for 8 years, and now here's my chance." Um, and so when it comes to youth, being modern, being innovative, those are not things you think of when you think of the Dallas Cowboys, especially on defense. So this is very new and it's very different. And for the Cowboys, I think it's somewhat of a high risk, high reward kind of strategy. It definitely feels like potentially a new identity, which they do need a new identity. And so some of these people are people that Christian Parker knew from his past that he worked with before, and some of them are just brand new, which I like because it to me it says that they're doing their due diligence. They're not just like hire a bunch of people you like. They're saying let's find people who are a good fit for this vision that we have of the defense. And that is so crucial because you need that cohesion going in. You need them to be on the same page going in. And it's just like liking each other, knowing each other, that shit'll only carry you for so long. But everybody being on the same page, being locked in step, having the same mission, that's the shit that gets you through a season. That's the shit that helps you find creative solutions to hard problems, which are bound to come up with everything this defense is going to be facing in 2026. So, y'all know me. X's and O's are fun, but I love stories. I love a good storyline. I love a good character arc. And so I feel like I'm starting to see the beginning threads, sneak peek for y'all. I feel like I'm starting to see the beginning of threads of what I'm going to be covering in 2026 when it comes to the Cowboys. And that is the development and progress of all these guys who are being hired. Because, like I said, some of these guys are in the pros for the first time. And so this is a really good time to really keep a good eye on each position on the defense and who's in charge of them and how they progress, how they develop, how they fit with one another, and just watch the story it tells about what the Cowboys are aiming for in terms of culture and what they're looking for in terms of these hires. And especially with the linebacker situation, right? Because I feel like every position had their issues, but the linebackers, when you think about the linebackers of the 2025 Dallas Cowboys, it's like take the whole unit and throw it away. And I'm not saying every single person was trash, right? Because like Demo, clearly not trash. Demo was clearly not trash. But some of the things that they did with him, take it and throw it away. And it's like, they did some things with Demo that was like creative at the time. It was creative in that like everybody's so creative kind of way, right? Um, but we don't need to see that shit again. We don't. So I'm just like, I take it and throw it away in that sense. Let's pretend like it didn't happen. Let's do things with Demo that make sense. Let's get Maris Lewifau back on track to being a competitor. Let's get linebackers who actually look like they know what they're doing and have the reaction speed and the skills necessary to do it. That like the two guys who were hired for the linebacker positions. Hold on, let me look at their names. So Scott Simmons, inside linebacker, was hired today. And then Chidira Uzo Daribe, I feel like he's gonna have a nickname by the time we get to training camp. So y'all keep me up to speed on that. Um, those two guys, oh my God. The film watchers, the film guys are gonna be watching their work in slow motion with a microscope. So I just hope they're prepared for that. I hope they're prepared for that. But okay, so there's several reasons though why the youth of these hires excites me. So um there's obviously a lot of upside to youth, right? So what I'm hoping for is more modern and innovative schemes. I think everybody wants that. And then I feel like some part of this is because of the relatability to players, right? Because when you start getting guys who are like in their mid 30s, they're still young enough to be relatable to young NFL players, but they also have enough like age and life experience and wisdom to still hold some authority. You know what I'm saying? I feel like that's like a cool balance. And that's why earlier I was like, it's very much cool uncle vibes, you know? So I dig that. I also feel like there might be an assumption that they're going to be more familiar with modern technology and analytics, which is coming into play more and more with modern defenses. Just being able to not only analyze but also to use modern technology and modern resources to analyze. So we're not talking about a bunch of guys where they have to unlearn old and ineffective tricks and they already know the new tricks. So there's a lot of advantages to the youth. Now, on the flip side, for those who are being a little bit cautious, it's probably because of the fact that typically when you look at like youth being added to a team, whether it's in terms of players or in terms of a coaching staff, you have some kind of veteran experience to balance that out. You don't have that here. The DC is young. Everybody on his staff seems to be young in NFL coaching years. You know what I'm saying? Um, and so that's not a that's not really what the Cowboys are going for here. To quote Naruto, well, not Naruto, but what's his name from Naruto, who is all about the power of youth. The Cowboys are all in on the power of youth when it comes to the defense. That seems to be the thing here. Um, so it is a bold strategy. It is risky, but here's the thing. I feel like if there's a time to do it, right now is the time to do it. If there was any time that the Cowboys were going to be like, nope, we're going all in on the youth, right now is the time to do it. And here's why. There's almost no way that they'll perform worse than Matt Eberflus's defense, right? And anywhere that they fall short, you can preemptively attribute it to growing pains because you're going to have so many new coaches trying to gel. Like I said, some of them are new to the NFL coming from college. You can attribute it to personnel changes. So they'll inevitably have to make changes with the players, add some, trade some. We're looking forward to seeing some different talent on the defense and what we saw in 2025, right? And then there's teaching a new scheme to the players, right? That's something else that's inevitably going to have to happen. So that's three things right there that you know are going to have to happen in 2026 for the Dallas Cowboys. So they're automatically going to be an improvement from 2025, and then you already have kind of a shield, kind of protection in terms of the narrative about what they bring to the table in 2026. So if there was any time for the Cowboys to take a risk in terms of who they hire and the age and the experience of those guys, and take that risk and say, hey, we're going to trust Brian Schottenheimer and Christian Parker to get the people that they like in place, this is the time to do it. They can't go wrong. Like, as a matter of fact, anybody writing about the Cowboys, covering the Cowboys, creating content about the Cowboys, you can practically pre-write those sections of your articles right now. Where it's like, oh, they fell short in blank, but this could be due to the new coaching scheme. Like, you can literally just pull one of these reasons out of a hat. You know what I'm saying? So the excuses are basically built into the hiring strategy. Not saying that they'll lean into those excuses, but it's like it kind of gives them a little bit less stress. It gives them a little bit of a release, a little bit of room to say, like, let's just focus on doing our jobs. We don't really have to worry about the narrative here. And then here's a couple of other benefits that I think is going to work out in the Cowboys' favor. So we've got a group of guys on the defensive side of the ball who are young and experienced enough to be modern and innovative, but they're also young and inexperienced enough to where they probably won't get poached after a year, even if they do well. The Cowboys defense is in great need of consistency, of some sort of identity. And the only way that you're going to get that is if you have some people who stick around. So I think that's another benefit of getting these coaches who are young, who are new to the league, is that, like, okay, we should have most of this group for the next couple years, for the next few years. You know what I'm saying? So, like, let's get some consistency here. Like, let's get some continuity. You know what I'm saying? So while I don't know a ton about what these coaches do, and I'm not going to try to predict what they're going to bring to the table in a completely new environment with a completely new staff, with a completely new scheme. Like I said, that's not my ministry, but the things that I just mentioned, I am excited about. I'm excited to see where it goes, and I think this will be a really good thing for the Cowboys defense. All right. Any questions? No. I think y'all are just saying hi to each other in the chat. What's up, Royal? Good to see you. Glad you came through. Clement says, defensive staff is coming along nicely. The SMU defensive coordinator, Scott Simmons, had a defense that was very good, and they were disciplined, aggressive, and execution of the game plans in games. Love it. Royal said, hi, Jazz. I'm eating some candy. Did you get some Valentine's Day candy? Did you get your Valentine's Day gift early? Is that why you're eating candy? I'm kind of hungry too. That's another reason why I'm just kind of like breezing through this stream. I need to order some food. um All right, so what we got next on the list? Who's next in my PowerPoint? Okay, now we can talk about the NFL and the NFLPA. This is going to be a little bit of a read and react as well. Because essentially what happened was the NFL filed a grievance against the NFLPA back in August about the public report, about the team report cards. So, you know, those report cards that people like so much that say what grades people got in, or not people, but teams got in various areas. Yeah. So basically, the NFL said that they shouldn't be allowed to make those public. And they said it because of, I'm going to see if I can bring this up on the screen. Because this was actually a section of the CBA that I brought up when I was talking about the interaction between Micah Parsons and Jerry Jones. So if y'all remember, when that whole speculation was going on, and the very public remarks that were made during the negotiations that fell through for Micah Parsons' contract, there was an episode of Get Up where Ryan Clark said the NFLPA might file a grievance because of some of the things that Jerry Jones was saying publicly. And so I looked into the CBA to see if that was a possibility, and I wrote an article about it. And it turned out that it was because of, I know it was Article 51. Why did I lose my bookmark here? Okay, here it is. Article 51, Section 6 covers public statements. So I'm going to bring this up for you guys. So here's what it says there. It says, the NFLPA and the Management Council agree that each will use reasonable efforts to curtail public comments by club personnel or players which express criticism of any club, its coach, or its operation and policy, or which tend to cast discredit upon a club, a player, or any other person involved in the operation of a club, the NFL, the Management Council, or the NFLPA. So when I brought this up back over the summer, club personnel referred to Jerry Jones, and the things that he was saying were kind of casting a bad light on Micah Parsons. And so I was like, okay, this must be what Ryan Clark was referring to, why he said the NFLPA might file a grievance. I didn't think they actually would because it was such a gray area, and they didn't. But this is a section that applies to the NFLPA and the public and the team report cards being made public. And so the 2025 report cards, which I'm about to share in a second, were already out by the time the ruling for this grievance came out. So that's why they're available. But essentially, the grievance means that they won't be able to do this in the future. So this is what they look like. They're on the NFLPA website. And so players grade their organization based on treatment of families, which is sad to see a D plus right there for any organization. That's messed up. But as you can see, Arizona Cardinals D plus. Oh, so it's treatment of families, the food and dining area, their nutritionists and dietitians, the locker rooms. Damn, F minus? How you get an F minus? What's less than an F? How do you worse than fail? Cardinals, get your shit together. Jesus. Training room, training staff, weight room, strength coaches, team travel, head coach, and ownership, where Arizona Cardinals also have a D minus. Arizona Cardinals have a very bad report card here. They just happen to be top on the list because they start with an A. But this is fucking terrible, Cardinals. Cardinals fans, get your people. What is happening here? But anyway, here's a little bit of information on this from Front Office Sports. They said the report cards, which were spearheaded by former Brown center and NFLPA president J.C. Tretter, are meant to expose poor conditions and pressure, if not outright publicly shame, owners to make improvements not mandated or regulated by the CBA. So, in other words, the reason why the Arizona Cardinals can function with such terrible grades is because the quality, the condition of these things is not mandated by the CBA. They're required to provide certain things, but it doesn't say anything about the quality of what is provided. You know what I'm saying? And so, Front Office Sports continues. Among the reasons for establishing the system, Treader said, he found players don't know what they're fully signing up for when changing teams, and the report cards help shed light on that. And so, when you look at what the NFLPA says about the report cards, they talk a lot about keeping players informed, making sure that players know what they're signing up for so that when trade discussions happen and things of that nature, they kind of know what's on the table, and it's not just them looking at the dollar amounts and the contract terms, that they're actually thinking about the environment that they're going into if they do change organizations. So the NFL had a problem with the public part of this because they were like, yo, you're making some of these teams look bad. Like, you're shaming these teams. And so, honestly, the NFL had a point. For the public, if you're not a player and if you're not an agent, there's really no reason for you to know what these grades are for these particular organizations unless you are a content creator like me and you just want to talk about them, or you're a writer and you want to talk about them, or you're a fan and you want to talk about. It's just to shame them. It's just to shame them and give people something to talk about this time of year. And so, like, the NFLPA feels like it's relevant information because some people made the point that, well, even whenever you're discussing players and you're discussing teams throughout the season, it's kind of good to have in the back of your mind how an organization scored on certain things. So, for example, if you're like, man, why are the Arizona Cardinals struggling like that? Having the context that they got a D for their training facilities and they also got a D for their food might give you a little bit of context, a little bit of a piece to that story of why their players are struggling so fucking much. It's because their facilities and their treatment and apparently also their ownership all kind of suck. Um, and so the NFLPA is like, if you're gonna talk about our players, we want you to have this information. Don't act like it's just them. Sometimes these motherfuckers is trash, and we need you to understand that. I feel like that's fair. I feel like that's fair. Um, and so I feel like I had the NFLPA's response. Did I? Da-da-da-dum. Okay, so this is a really long FOS article, and I'm not sure where the response went in my notes. But here's what I can tell you that I remember because I do actually read and study these things. Um, the NFLPA is going to work with a couple of different organizations to see if they can adjust the way the the surveys are conducted so that they fall within guidelines that will allow them to continue to share them publicly. I don't know how long that will take, but that is something that they're working on because they feel strongly about them being made public. And I'm really not sure, honestly, what the method would be for players to get this information if they weren't just on a public website. And maybe that's also the concern. Maybe they're thinking if we send it out via email or if we put it behind a password protected wall, it adds an extra barrier and players are less likely to hear about it. Or maybe they're like, hey, they're not going to read about it on their own. They need to know about the worst organizations. And the best way for them to find out is when those worst organizations get written about. We just feel like this information being public is a way more efficient way to get this important information to the players. And maybe that's the argument that they want to make. I just don't know if the methodology is going to be the key because no matter what method you use, if it turns out that the Arizona Cardinals are trash, I need to scroll through and find another bad team because they're just the first ones who popped up. And so they are getting like the worst of this. But if it turns out that a team is trash, they're just trash. And if the CBA is basically saying that you're not allowed to say in public that an organization is trash, then how do you get around that, you know? Like, how do you get around that and still be honest about the grades? And so the only other thing I can think is maybe adjust the wording of that in the next CBA negotiations and maybe adjust it to where, because like we don't know who gave the grades for these particular organizations, right? So maybe there's some way that you can word it so that since you don't know where the grades came from or who said what for these report cards, that it's allowed to be made public, because I do think this is valuable information. And since we cover the Cowboys here, let's see what they got. So for treatment of families, the Cowboys got an A. They better. I feel like Dak bringing his girls around, bringing his fiance around is like, no, we need to treat our families with respect. We need to treat them well. Food and dining got a B plus. That's a little bit disappointing. Nutritionist and dietitian got a B plus for the Cowboys. The locker room got an A. They do have a nice locker room last time I checked. Training room got a C. Very disappointing. Training staff got a C. Weight room got an A minus. If you've ever been on a tour of the Star, you know that weight room is fucking phenomenal. It's like the best thing I've ever seen in my life. Strength coaches got a B plus. Team travel got a B minus, which is wild. Head coach got an A. Good job for Shotty. And ownership got a B. So they have their issues with the Joneses, but it sounds like it's not all terrible. I'm trying to see who got the best grades. Okay, the Raiders got A's across the board, except in treatment of families, they got a B plus. But for everything else, they got A's and A minuses. So I mean, hey, shout out to them. It sounds like they have a foundation for improving if the players are that happy. The Dolphins looks like they got A's across the board. You better you're in fucking Miami. Like you better like I feel like it's easy to keep players happy in Miami. So I'm happy to see that. Minnesota Vikings are on honor roll, A's and B's. Who else we got? Okay, those seem to be the best. Atlanta Falcons also got A's and B's. So they're also on honor roll. Baltimore Ravens got close C plus with treatment of family, those. Interesting. But yeah, so that's the situation with the NFL and the NFLPA. So if y'all have any more questions about that, or if y'all want me to follow that, like always, mention it in the chat, mention it in the comments, and I'll keep tabs on, well, as much as I can. With it being that the NFLPA is going to be responsible for moving forward with this and figuring out what their options are, there probably won't be much information available to the public until they figure something out. So I hope this isn't the last time that we see report cards. I hope they find another way to do it. But we'll see what happens this time next year. All right. So the last thing that I want to go over with y'all is y'all know we can't get out of here without doing the as it is in sports, so it is in life. And today's as it is in sports, so it is in life is dedicated to one Mr. Ilia Malinin. And so, if you've been watching the Winter Olympics, you know that a lot of people were looking forward to the men's freestyle skate today. And um, going into this competition, so for the men's ice skaters, there's the short program that determines who qualifies for the freestyle skate. And going into the freestyle skate, Ilia Malinin was in first place, and everybody expected him to win gold in this category. He came into the Winter Olympics being called the quad god. Actually, let me pull him up. I still got NFL. Well, you can't see his face. I maybe should have picked a better picture. But he came into the Winter Olympics being called the quad god because of his prowess when it came to quadruple jumps and spins. And so, like I said, everybody was expecting him to win gold. And not only did he not win gold, he actually fell very, very short. And so that's why today's As It Is in Sports, So It Is in Life is dedicated to Malinin. I got to say his name right. Ilia Malinin, and what his performance today tells us about mindset and pressure and performance. So, the first point that I want to talk about is the fact that what happened today, and I'm talking about the competition in general. What happened today was not a show of greatness like what we expected. If anything, it was a war of attrition. And what I mean by that is that what people expected to see from this competition was the best in the world. But when I tell you, every single skater fucked up today. every single one. You would have thought that falling in your routine was a requirement for this competition because they all did it, you know? And so when it comes to the person who won, Mikhail Shidorov, I think I'm saying his name right. Um, he didn't win because he was so much better than everybody else. He literally won because he was the least bad. He won because he was the most functional human in that group. And so that brings us to point number one of, as it is in sports, so it is in life. Perfection is a luxury, but persistence is a necessity. So when we do these, we always talk about how these lessons can apply socially, romantically, and professionally, right? And so if you think about those three categories, whatever the gold medal is in your life in those categories, that gold medal, whatever that is for you, it won't always go to the person with the most talent. It won't always go to the person who checks all the boxes. It won't always go to the person with the highest ceiling. Because if it did, that would have gone to Ilia Malinin today. But that's not always the case. Sometimes it just goes to the person who wobbles the least. Sometimes it just goes to the person who falls down the least. You know what I'm saying? Sometimes it goes to the person who falls the least. And so when you're in a situation where the environment is chaotic and everybody is fucking up, you don't always need to be flawless. Like, I think sometimes we get in our heads thinking that we need to be flawless, thinking that we need to be perfect, and that's not always the case. Sometimes you just need to stay on your feet, and that's all you need to focus on. Showing up is 90% of it. And then the other 10% of it is just staying upright. So that brings us to point number two, which is where we talk about pressure and not only its presence, but how it can evolve and how it can change. So, one of the things that's been coming up throughout this entire Winter Olympics is the theme of mindset and who looks tight versus who looks relaxed and who looks prepared versus who looks nervous. And we're talking about this Winter Olympics. There's a lot of broadcasters who are former athletes, former Olympians. So we're not talking about fans who are converted to reporters and, they're just speculating. No, we're talking about people who have been there, people who have done it. So they know what they're talking about. And they've talked so much about mindset. It's confirmation that your mindset, how you go into a competition thinking about that competition, is literally 99% of the battle, because they talk about it just as much, if not more, than they talk about the technical aspect of most of these sports. Even when I was watching the luge and you see people hitting the wall over and over again, broadcasters are like, oh, they're not focused, they're not concentrating. Something about this part is getting into the competitors' heads. They're saying that, right? So in the case of Ilia Malinin, he went into this competition and all people were talking about was, oh, he might land 7 quads, he might ascend to legend status. They said that place was packed and people were there specifically to see him. They said Brian Boitano was there to see him. And it was almost like they were expecting to see some sort of coronation. And they might have seen that, except the pressure got to Malinin. And it's a reminder that pressure isn't just a level that you beat, like in a video game. Like, you go through enough mini bosses, you get enough XP, and then all of a sudden you face pressure and you beat it because you've got the tools to do so. That's not how pressure works. Pressure is a shapeshifter. And I think nothing proves it more than all these athletes being so nervous in the Winter Olympics. Because here's the thing. There's a lot of us that in our life, if we think about what we do, the things that we love, and we were to somehow receive confirmation that we're one of the best in the world, a lot of us would think that would give us some sense of security, right? And so you watch these athletes on television and you're like, you're at the Olympics. You've got your confirmation that you're one of the best in the world. You're the best your country had to send in what you do. And so then you have to think to yourself, how does that not soothe your anxiety? How does it not? It doesn't, because pressure doesn't just go away from that. It changes. However you handle the pressure that it takes for you to get to the Olympics is how you're going to handle the pressure that you feel when you want a gold medal, when you feel like it's within reach. You know what I'm saying? Once again, socially, professionally, romantically, this all applies. So the nervousness that you get when it comes to dating, You're going to bring that same nervousness and that same insecurity to a relationship. If you're insecure in a relationship, you're going to bring that to a marriage. Same thing with your profession. If you're nervous about getting a job, once you get the job, you're going to be nervous about the promotion. It's not in achieving so much that you no longer feel nervous. It's about learning how to handle that nervousness, learning how to handle that anxiety, learning how to handle the pressure. And so for Malinin, the physical part of the sport should have been second nature. The man trains for hours and hours a day. Both of his parents were Olympians. They represented Uzbekistan back in the day. But it was the expectation that became a mental cage, because that spotlight that was on him, that's something that his parents never experienced. So they could teach him all day about the skating part. They knew about that, but they never had a spotlight on him like what he had on him today. And so one of the things that he proved today was that you can be the most prepared, blessed person on the planet and still be paralyzed by what if. You can spend, this is the as it is in sports, so it is in life part. You can spend 10,000 hours mastering your craft, but if you haven't mastered the internal monologue, the pressure will always find a way in. Anxiety does not give a fuck about your resume. I promise you that. And so you can't expect the best version of yourself to just show up automatically. You have to train your mind to handle the noise. You have to train it to handle the spotlight. You have to train it to handle the pressure. Like that best version of yourself will only show up insofar as you've trained it to show up in those moments. So the as it is in sports, so it is in life lesson is that your skills and your talents, those are your floor, but your mindset will always be your ceiling. And that brings us to point number 3, which I call the ghost of Beijing. And here's why. It was the most telling moment to me of this competition. And it wasn't anything that happened on the ice. It was what happened when he got off the ice, after he fell, after he and let me actually rewind this a little bit, because before he got on the ice, first place was there for the taking for him, because like I said, everybody else had fallen or made some mistake in their routine. So if he had just done the routine right and not fallen, he didn't have to get every turn perfect. He could have made some mistakes and still gotten first place, but he made so many mistakes, he ended up falling down to 8th. And so by the time he got off the ice and he was waiting for his score, he probably already knew he had lost gold. I don't think he knew how far he had fallen though. But it was what he said in that moment. It was a real mask off moment. And I really didn't know much about Ilia Malinin before this competition. So I didn't know anything about his character or his personality. But what he said was, and I might be paraphrasing a little bit here, but what he said was something along the lines it was something along the lines of, if they had chosen me to go to Beijing, I wouldn't have skated like this today. He said, if they had chosen me to go to Beijing, I wouldn't have skated like this today. Now, Beijing happened in 2022, 4 years ago. Apparently, he was not selected to compete in that Olympics, but he was selected to compete in 2026. But here's the thing, comments like that don't just pop up out of nowhere. That had to already be sitting in the back of his mind. So I heard him say that, and I instantly thought, you are so focused on some shit that happened 4 years ago. You couldn't even do your job for 4.5 minutes. That's how long these routines are. All you have to do is focus for 4.5 minutes. He didn't have to maintain his mindset forever, not all day, not all week, for 4.5 minutes, for 270 seconds. If he could have just been the best version of himself, he could have been a good version of himself. He didn't even have to be the best version of himself to beat the routines we saw on the floor today. But if he could have focused on doing his job for 270 seconds, he could have given a big ass middle finger to anybody involved in that Beijing decision. You know what I'm saying? But it was in the back of his mind the whole time, like a lead weight holding him down. You know what I'm saying? And so that bitterness, I feel, is one of the things that probably fucked him up. And so the as it is in sports, so it is in life lesson from that is, when you hold on to what should have been, you contaminate what is. And so Malinin's mindset today literally changed the trajectory of his career. And I say it's his mindset because the stuff that he had to do in that routine, we've seen him do it. We saw him do it a few minutes before his routine, but before it was his turn, because after the commercial break, they showed everybody on the ice, testing out the ice, practicing their turns. We saw him do it. We saw him do everything he had to do in that routine. So we knew he could do it. But when the eyes were on him, when it was his turn to be judged, when it was his turn to get a score, all of a sudden, pressure got to him. All of a sudden, he's falling, he's slipping, he's unstable. It was ugly, you know? And so, what we have to remember from this is that we cannot let the why not me sabotage the how do I. The why not me from the past will fuck up the how do I of today. So if you're still trying to prove people wrong from 4 years ago, there's no way that you're going to focus on what you need to do today. You're going to be too distracted. And so take this lesson from this. Once again, socially, romantically, professionally, don't let your Beijing fuck up your Milan. Don't let that bitterness from the people who turned you down, from the people who ghosted you, fuck up the new connections you might form with somebody today. Don't let feedback from your old boss when you were a completely different person, because I hope you're a different person today than you were 4 years ago. I hope you're a different person today than you were 4 months ago. We should all be growing and improving ourselves. But don't let that feedback from some motherfucker from 4 years ago, I don't care if it was last year, don't let that person fuck up what you got going for you today. Like, you have to, and like, part of being able to handle the pressure, because sometimes pressure isn't just from what's at stake right now. Sometimes pressure literally is from us trying to prove people wrong, from us trying to prove ourselves wrong, from us running away from something in the past. So the same mindset work that we have to do to learn how to handle that pressure that evolves from wanting to be good to wanting to be great to wanting to go to the Olympics to wanting to get the gold, the way that pressure evolves and the way that we have to steel our mindset against it, we have to do the same thing when it comes to bitterness and this part of us that always worries about what people think. Because like the last thing any of us want in our personal lives is to miss out on a chance for a gold medal and end up in fucking 8th place because we worried about some motherfuckers from 4 years ago and then we end up proving them right. So that's as it is in sports, so it is in life. That is the episode for today. I'm going to check the comments before I get out of here. Da-da-da-da. All right, nothing new. Well, thanks for joining me in the chat, you guys. So I know y'all are sick of me missing Tuesdays. I'm gonna try to get back on my shit. But I hadn't posted anything since I made that Bad Bunny video on Monday, so I was like, let me make sure I get on here before the week is up. It's just been a complicated week, but I'll see y'all next week. Thanks y'all for tuning into this episode of Bitches Love Sports. I'm your host Jazz Monet, and I'm out.
You only think of us as a bitches when you intimidated. Put it that way. I think
people look at a woman and she's an aggressive woman who's out to get what she wants to get. You know what I'm saying? Ambitious, and they want to say, you know, when a male is assertive, this is what he wants. He's looked at as a strong male, but yet when I get it, you know, I'm a bitch.
Exactly.
And if that's what I gotta be, exactly, to get what I want and to make it somewhere, then I'll just be there.